G'day legends, welcome to What I Watched Last Month, August edition. It was a really great month for me, and I think that you're going to want to stick around if you're after some great movie recommendations. So, to start the month, I watched The Hyperboreans. This was my first film for the year at the 2024 Melbourne International Film Festival. And you might be fooled thinking that this was going to be some kind of theatre production on stage, film for screen, which personally I don't enjoy those too often. But The Hyperboreans is so much more than that. It's a big call, but I would say that this has some of the most creative set design that I've ever seen. The use of props and puppetry intertwined with camera work is really something to marvel at here. It was so visually interesting that even if the pacing is a little slow at times, I don't think it's really possible to get bored watching this, and it is a shame that a fair few reviews seem to mention people falling asleep in screenings. On top of its creativity, there's some interesting political commentary going on here about fascism's influence in Chile and the rule of Augusto Pinochet, a military dictator responsible for numerous human rights violations. I don't fully understand what this film is trying to say, and it is a little inaccessible at times, but it's definitely worth checking out. Then I watched Blackbox Diaries. This was another film screening at MIFF, and it was a documentary following journalist Shiori Ito and her courageous investigation of her own sexual assault in an attempt to prosecute her high-profile offender. The story behind this documentary is inspiring but also deeply disturbing, and it really highlights the outdated nature of Japan's judicial system when it comes to something like this. I did feel like it would have been good to get a bit more background into Shiori as a person and as a journalist, and at times the non-linear presentation of the documentary was a bit confusing, but we were also sitting in the second row for this, so I'm not sure I got to fully appreciate the film in its sort of holistic entirety. It's definitely a very confronting watch at times, but Shiori's courage and her story is also truly inspiring. She's an incredibly strong woman, and it was very special to be treated to a QA screening in the cinema with her there after the screening. After that, I watched Tuesday, my third film at MIFF for this year. This is a relatively unknown A24 release, but I think you can stream it on Amazon now if you're interested. I won't speak too much about this one as I made a full review for it here, but I will say it was kind of like live action Studio Ghibli, which isn't something you see every day. You don't want to miss my review on this if that sort of thing sounds intriguing to you, so I've linked that video down in the description. Then I watched Coraline, or more specifically, the 15-year anniversary re-release, and it was in 3D. It felt like a trip back to the 2009 to 2012 era where you'd go to the cinemas and chuck on your 3D glasses. Really warm and nostalgic. My girlfriend was really keen to see this one as it was one of her favorites back in the day, and I was really glad that I was able to appreciate this much more as an adult. Something that resonated with me this time was the perspective of Coraline's parents. They're overworked, they're tired, sometimes they just completely lack the energy to spend as much time with Coraline as she'd like them to. Because of that, Coraline yearns for something more. The idea of other parents that might give her more attention and love. But at the end of the day, she learns that her own parents' love for her is genuine, and that's what really matters most. I love the way that this film conveys that message for kids and adults alike. Straight after that, in the cinema, I watched the short Rebuilding Coraline. This was a short documentary about making new Coraline puppets 15 years after the film's release. The craftsmanship was really interesting to see and such a special part of the film itself. But at the same time, I also really found this short quite confusing. It didn't really explain why these puppets were being made or if they were being used to remake scenes from the original film. So I was quite unsure what was happening in that regard. But again, I was really happy to stay and appreciate the animators behind the scenes. Then I finally got around to watching Longlegs. Man, this was an interesting one. I was talking with my friend Jack after watching the movie. If this had come out 5 years ago, both of us probably would have been singing its praises, or at the very least been a little bit more enthusiastic about it. For me, it felt like it really treaded over tropes that have already been done to death the last 10 years and done in better ways. It offered some very interesting concepts, but the payoff kind of had me rolling my eyes a little bit, like that's all there was behind all of this. I have some issues with the ending as well, but I'm not going to get into spoilers. But that being said, Micah Monroe, Blair Underwood, and Nicolas Cage's performances were absolutely brilliant and played such a key role in building up an extraordinary sense of tension, something that Longlegs does incredibly well. Jack and I walked out of the cinema feeling like we were on the verge of a panic attack for the last 2 hours. Then I watched Alien Romulus. Sorry lads, just had a little bug on me. Yeah, this was probably the most enjoyable Alien film that I've ever seen. And I know that might be a bit of a weird thing to say, but the other Alien films, I just remember being so deeply disturbing and uncomfortable to watch. I do really need to revisit them, and I probably appreciate them a lot more as an adult. But yeah, with Alien Romulus, it had the perfect mix of thriller sort of elements, horror, of characters that you like, and a really fun, contained story. Kaylee Spaney is the absolute GOAT, and with this and Civil War, she's having a huge year. I'm saying get her in Dune 3. David Johnson also, he's a revelation as Andy, and hopefully he gets a lot more work from this. Something I didn't like was some questionable VFX for one specific character that you'll know instantly when you see him, but I won't spoil it. But yeah, overall, this was a really fun ride in the cinema, and I'm so glad that it's doing well. More Alien films, please. I'm ready. Then I watched Memoir of a Snail. Coming from acclaimed Australian director Adam Elliott, you might know him as the director behind Mary and Max. I watched this as my last film for MIFF this year, and it was the perfect film to end on. This film is so uniquely Australian. It captures parts of our culture in a really special way. The stop motion animation really is very special, and you can see how much effort and creativity and love was put into this. It was great to see the Avengers of Australian actors come together for this, with Eric Bana, Magda Szubanski, and Tony Armstrong providing their voices for the silver screen here. At times, this movie perhaps hits you on the head with one too many tragedies for them all to allow their impact to be felt, but there's so much to enjoy here, and that really shouldn't stop you from seeing this movie. It's getting an international release in October, and if you have a chance to see this outside of Australia, it would mean a lot to me if you'd consider checking out this film in cinemas. If you're a fan of something like Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, this will be right up your alley. And to finish the month, I watched The Teacher Who Promised the Sea. This was a special movie night with Mum for me. I was so happy that I went along to see this. There's something about the youthful shine in a child's eye that should give us all hope for the future. And I think it's sad that as adults, we do tend to lose that feeling of hope, or at the very least, we tend to bury it. This movie really explores that idea through the backdrop of the lead up to the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, based on the true story of Anthony Benages, a school teacher at the time. The more you learn about the historical events that this film is based on, the more emotional it becomes. I'm always a sucker for a heartfelt film about kids being shown their potential, a well-intentioned teacher trying to impart some positive life lessons despite the cruelness of the world, and based on real historical events. This film explores all those themes in such an impactful way, and it's an important memory of the events of that time. Please do yourself a favor and find time to watch this movie, and also bring a box of tissues because it might make you tear up. Really beautiful film. Anyway guys, that was my August. If you want to see 13 more movies that I loved and maybe a few in there that I hated, make sure you go and check out my What I Watched in July video here, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.